What's up, solutionaries? Hugely important topic, bigly important topic. As you all have pretty much heard by now, the actor Alec Baldwin has had a negligent discharge on the set of his movie Rust. Would it be safe to say that his firearms manipulation skills and safety understanding is rusty? Too soon. I'm making light of something to add some levity to it, but the reality is, a young woman who was a cinematographer for that on that particular set lost her life. There's a bunch of swirling accusations. There's a bunch of blame to, justifiably go around. And now that a few days have, kind of passed and we've gotten some of the information out, I want to go through some of the actual what has happened, what has not happened, some of the theories that have not been proven, some of the questions that you all are going to have, as well as some of the areas where we seem to see a divide in the Second Amendment community around this negligent discharge. We say negligent discharge because there's no such thing as an accident. When it deals with firearms, there are four basic, now some people say there's more, but there's four generally accepted basic rules of firearm safety. Treat every firearm like it's loaded. Don't point a firearm at anything you're not willing to destroy. Keep your trigger finger out of the trigger guard until you're ready to shoot. Know your target and what's beyond that. In this world of Second Amendment conversation, nothing's ever perfect. No one's ever going to completely agree on everything. So again, there's additions to that, but we're going to start with the basic four. So in order to have a negligent discharge, you had to be negligent about at least two of those rules in order for someone to be harmed. And in this instance, a young lady who was a cinematographer on the set was unfortunately lost her life, killed, as well as someone else on the team that initial reports are the round traveled through her and hit the next person who was able to sustain life. Now let's start at the simple space. Obviously, Hollywood generally is contradictory because of their attack, meaning by the actors, the attack on firearms and firearms ownership, but the use of firearms in all of their films. All of their films got a gun in it. All of the action films, gun. Why does the gun industry continue to whore itself out, and I mean the manufacturers, to get a 10-second product placement, knowing that the actors and as well as Hollywood in general has a very anti-gun stance? And that's a legitimate question. But the reality is Hollywood is there to pretend. And some of those guys that are on that side of the argument also say, well, no one should ever mishandle a firearm and we shouldn't give them a pass just because it's Hollywood. Now, this is where there's the split in the community. Most of the people that are saying that haven't actually been on a movie set. Movies are designed to make pretend of real life scenarios to tell a story. If I'm the bad guy in a movie and my job is to rob someone and that scene calls for that, my job is to point the firearm, right? Or if they black, Hollywood will make it be turn the gun sideways because ignorance that Hollywood perpetuates. But my job as the bad actor or the character is to present my firearm and attempt to shoot the person. If it's a murder scene, I have to point the firearm at a person, which is breaking one of the firearm safety rules. I have a firearm, I'm pointing it at something in reality to simulate a scene of a bad person that doesn't care or even know about the four firearm rules. If your position is even Hollywood actors should be held accountable completely to the four basic rules of firearm safety, then you're saying that you don't want any more movies made that have anything to do with firearms. And ironically, that's in alignment with a more anti-gun position, which is we should be taking firearms out of movies. Kind of like on your apps, mostly, they don't have an actual emoji for an actual firearm anymore. It's like a water gun, which is stupid. That's going in that direction. If you stand on this position that Hollywood should not use firearms until they change, or there shouldn't be scenes shot that way and all of these other different things, there should be a rule to do that. You're in essence asking the state to tell private business what to do in regards because it's for your safety. We got to be careful that we're not arguing the same way that our opposition to our freedoms and liberties are. So if you're a pro-gun person that says Hollywood, because I don't like Hollywood, Hollywood should have standards set and mandated by the government to make sure that Hollywood does every single thing correctly, you're asking for more censorship by the state or legislation on Hollywood, primarily because you don't like that Hollywood is so anti-gun vocally and contradictory because all of the action movies got guns in them. In movies where there's people playing pretend, there's going to be people doing things that are in violation of the 4 basic rules of firearm safety on that set. Now, Maj, are you justifying this? Are you saying that the 4 standard rules should be broken? No. There's a thing called armorers. Armorers are on a movie set to make sure that the weapons handling is done in a safe and responsible way. Clearly on the set of this movie Rust, which Alec Baldwin is also a producer of, clearly the armorers have not been great. There's been stories that have came out. That's why it's important to wait a little bit before you just want to jump on the topic to talk about it to be first. There have been stories coming out dealing with 1, the armorer being fired from another set for unsafe practices. 2, unsafe practices being reported on the Rust set prior to and people walking off. And 3, firearms used to shoot these scenes were also used on the scene of Rust with actual live ammunition to do plinking. If you don't know what plinking is, that's just fun shooting at targets. All of these things are complete red flags. First and foremost, if a firearm space is unsafe, everything stops. It gets fixed and nothing moves until it's consistently fixed and the problem is solved. Solutionary shit. If you're cutting corners to save $1 in the name of the bottom lines, and it leads into someone losing their life, everyone responsible should be held accountable. The reality is there's armorers around for that specific job. So if there was a massive blunder on several levels of the armorer being wrong, the unsafe practices, using firearms and live round ammunition on set for plinking, and then the armorer not getting to that firearm and leaving a live round in a firearm, and then someone handing it to the actor, we can't just say it's only the actor. It's the actor that pulled the trigger, and that's all of that chain of command, because those armorers have one job. Make sure that the firearms on set are secure. Colossal blunder on every level. Now, going back to someone saying that this is completely Alec Baldwin's fault. Let's slide in him for a minute. Alec Baldwin is very anti-gun. Alec Baldwin has gained a reputation for being kind of a jerk. Alec Baldwin was the producer of the movie. Alec Baldwin shares a ton of that blame, but he's not the only person responsible. When you're arrogant, anti-something, and use that same something that you say you're against on your movie set, cut corners to be budget friendly, and it impacts you not learning about those same tools, then what starts to happen is you don't respect the tool. Alec Baldwin didn't respect the tool. Alec Baldwin couldn't have known the difference between a live round and a blank round. So even if the armorer would have handed him a firearm and said, check to make it clear, we got to go back to the fact that he wouldn't check to make it sure it's clear, because the scene, if it's a scene, another question, if it's a scene being shot where someone is being shot on the movie scene, you wouldn't check for an empty round or an empty slide or an empty barrel, excuse me. You would want to see something there. So even if Alec Baldwin actually did take the time to be informed about something, even if he's against it, that wouldn't have changed the simple fact that even in checking it, he still would have had to see a round. He would have had to trust that the armorer put a blank round in that firearm. But how would he know the difference? He's anti-gun. Now back to the gun community. We have to make sure that we're not in such a thirst to highlight the basic four rules of firearm safety, which is, we agree, everyone should know about those. Everyone should know about those. But we can't be in a rush to say that so quickly, not factoring in the reality of the scenario. Unless you are actually saying, I believe that there should be no movie shot with firearms that entails a bad guy pointing a firearm at the good guy, or the good guy pointing a firearm back at the bad guy. Even if they're simulating this, while doing that, they're both breaking one of the cardinal 4 rules of firearm safety. You need to say that and stand on it and not be contradictory. You should also not watch any Hollywood movies that have any type of firearms in them, because in those movies, they are breaking the 4 firearm rules, or a few of them. So when we go to SHOT Show, SHOT Show's annually, well, hasn't been for a couple of years now, but SHOT Show is the world's largest gun show. It's not generally open to the public. It's stuff that's coming down in the future. It's an industry event. There's 80, sometimes 100,000 people at SHOT Show. There's 4 different floors at SHOT Show. Anywhere that there's a firearm, clear or not, in SHOT Show, if you're on the bottom floor, first, second, or third, whatever floor you're at in the Sands Expo Center where it's normally at. Even if your firearm is clear, if it's pointing down and you're on the second floor, it's not a safe direction because there's people under you. If you're on the first floor and you're having your firearm pointed up because there's people all around you on that same floor, there's people above you, you're breaking one of the 4 rules of basic firearm safety. If you're on the 4th floor and you're pointing it up the entire time and you happen to not sweep anybody and the gun's clear, you're still pointing it up at the roof, you're still pointing the firearm up at lighting and all the gas lines or whatever is up there on the roof. So we got to look at our own contradictions when we say that. The reality is an armorer is there to make sure that that set is safe. We have to use this as an opportunity to inform Hollywood, hey, when you're so anti something and you don't inform yourself about it, this type of negligence can happen. This is the moment where we can actually tap in, and instead of just attacking, we can potentially attempt to educate without making ourselves look contradictory. Because if you saw all of the John Wick films, there is literally a bunch of people shooting at each other with projectiles. Well, they're flagging people, they're doing all of those other different things. Now let's bring it back to Alec Baldwin. Do I think that Alec Baldwin holds some of the blame in this scenario? Yes, I would say emphatically it's totally up to him if there wasn't such a thing as armorers. But because there is a thing such as armorers, he has to take some of the blame and they have to take some of the blame. You have one job: to say that because we don't like Hollywood and we don't like Alec Baldwin, we're just going to assume all of the blame on him and make ourselves look contradictory at the same time. It's a contradiction of the highest order. Lastly, wild theories. This theory that this young lady was working on a documentary about pedophilia and this young lady was this, that, and the third. Because there was such a colossal level of blunders on set, from the armorers to the live rounds to whatever, it makes that theory, and I haven't yet to see any proof on that. I've just heard people saying it on social media, and I cannot only go with that. Because there's no proof of that, we got to make sure that we're not just highlighting wild theories without actual facts. Just like we don't want Hollywood to say the gun show loophole, guns kill people, so forth and so on. And now they look like complete hypocrites because one of their own has done it. And they're probably somehow going to try to blame the firearm. But we have to make sure that we're not doing the same exact thing. Until you have facts of the matter, don't speak on it. Until you have more facts, while remaining open to the fact that even more facts, additional facts, may surface. Until you have that, don't just repeat that wild story. The sensationalized story sounds very sexy, but that doesn't move our culture, that doesn't move our liberties, nor does it move our freedoms and our Second Amendment rights forward. It makes us sound like we're repeating statements that have not been proven. So in closing, Alec Baldwin shares a lion's share of that blame because he is the person that pulled the trigger. That does not mean that Alec Baldwin is the only person responsible in that scenario. Everyone should be held accountable. Armorers, production, that person that handed him the firearm, everybody shares that blame. That is involuntary manslaughter. That is not deliberate homicide. Second Amendment community, don't be in a rush to just say things because it's somebody that you disagree with, because you said none of this before Alec Baldwin shot somebody on set. You said none of this when John Wick 1 through 3, when Heat, when all of these movies, these great movies with amazing firearms, shootout scenes and all of that, you said nothing about this. Don't be contradictory now. Take time to highlight gentlemen like Buck Doyle, who actually goes on set, works with the likes of Michael B. Jordan, The Rock, to inform them on safe and responsible firearms handling while on set. This is an opportunity for us to learn and prevent this type of negligence that takes life. Don't be so on your high horse of, I'm gonna own the libs and own Hollywood and own the left and own the anti-gun people, that we don't move our mission and our agenda forward. We use this as an educational moment, like we kind of do at Black Guns Matter. Don't be contradictory, be safe, be solutions.
These are big homie rules, big homie rules.